You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a podcast where we discuss the ideas of philosophy, ethics, religion, history, and culture. Alongside regular guests and friends, we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy. Hey, how are we going to start this? Are you ready? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Didn't ask you, yeah.
No, I'm ready.
So, secularism.
Yeah, that's a fun topic that you chose for us today.
Well, I think it is fun because it's one of the most important debates going on at the moment.
At the moment?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Look at Turkey.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example of that.
We should probably start by defining what the hell secularism actually is.
Yeah, that's a good start.
You've given that job to me, haven't you?
Yes, I did give that job to you since you are host.
Right. Well, essentially, it can mean a lot of different things, which is really annoying. I was speaking to a Christian a while back in the pub, and he was like, I'm not a secularist. And I got the sense he actually was. I just don't think he
understood the term?
Yeah, I think he meant I'm not an atheist, but a lot of the time it has this crossover with like atheism or materialism or whatever, but we're talking about it in like a political sense. The separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Basically. But there's a little bit more to it and why that should be a desirable thing. And it's not to say that you can't be religious and also believe in the separation of church and state. There are plenty of really good religious reasons, very strong theological reasons why you would want that separation.
Yeah.
It's not just like a trick that atheists use in politics.
Yeah, the research I've been doing, you get a lot of people who, on both, who are secular and who are not, and they both have the same opinion that it's like an atheist trying to take over the world. That they're trying to manipulate the world by getting rid of religious power. And
I think they often look to countries like Russia or Albania or Cuba to say that.
Well, it's the socialist countries or ones that are a bit more hard right now after the fall of communism. I mean, China is probably the best example then of where people say, this is a secular country. Look at them, though. The quick counter argument obviously is that China isn't secular and China has a religion, and that religion is Marxist atheism.
Yeah, it's important to remember that regimes are effectively religions, and proper secularism, in the sense that we're going to advocate today, is more about protecting religious people than it is denying them any sort of right. In fact, it's like a neutral playing field so that all religions can enjoy all their rights, so long as they don't infringe on others. Yeah. And the problem is there's a lot of leeway in that.
Yeah, so it's quite a vivid spectrum, really.
Yeah.
When it comes to where a country wants to fall on it and how they want to go about protecting religions, or if they're protecting people from religions.
So looking at this definition a little bit, this idea of like removing any bias or privilege by separating the official influence that a religion has in political institutions, so that like a certain religion can't dominate other people that don't feel that way, because religion by its very nature is like, it's subjective, it's based on a sense of faith, so there are obvious reasons why you would want to stop that from being just pushed onto people. It's like it should be something that people come to freely.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting definition, actually, because that goes quite against what you'd assume America would be when it comes to the pinnacle of secularism, which you think was America, written into the Bill of Rights as defining freedom from religion and freedom of religion. Yet at the same time, one of the biggest lobbies in American politics is the Christian.
Yeah, well, America's a very interesting case because they were influenced by the Enlightenment, just like France. So the collection of thinkers, and largely atheists, but also a lot of Christians as well, who were trying to look to more material, and so we're going to use the word secular here, but secular in this context means more like this worldly.
Yeah.
Secularism as a political idea is the separation of church and state, but you also have this idea of secular as like a secular ethics, or so that sort of does mean non-religious, and that's where I think a lot of the debate gets a little bit confused. Yeah, and I think people just think, oh, you must be like an atheist, you must just want to push atheism onto everybody, and that's not the case. So yeah, France and America were kind of influenced by the same milieu of thinkers, people like John Locke, Holyoake, the kinds of people who came up with the idea of secularism, people who were sort of advocating liberal rights, anti-slavery, progressive ideas that we have today, democracy. and of course science. And these are people like Voltaire and Spinoza were saying stuff like this, but they came out with very different ideas of secularism.
Yeah, and how to achieve it as well.
Yeah. Do you know anything about France and their idea of secularism? And
yeah, I've got like a limited idea of France, and basically their idea is that religion is the detriment of man.
yeah, that was how it started. Yeah.
And it basically comes out of the fact that they, obviously having the estates that they had, the French, they had the noblemen and then the clergy were its own elite class, that they had this situation that they thought, wow, we're being ruled not just by elites, not just by kings, we're being ruled by God and his representatives on earth, as it were.
Yeah. Supposed representatives.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I mean, go watch Les Mis. That's that, isn't it? That's the French Revolution.
Oh God, no! That's a separate small revolution that failed. It's like one of the July Revolution. Yeah, they all died.
Never watched it.
No, they all died. They lost.
Right.
Pointless. It took them another 20 years before they actually got back into power.
Well, yeah. So there was a French Revolution at some point. Guillotines were involved. They got rid of the monarchy because they associate the monarchy with an abuse of power, and they wanted a secular government in place. But their idea of secularism didn't then protect the rights of the religious. On paper, it sort of did in a lot of areas. It took a lot of kind of adjustments to their legislation, but generally they were using secularism as a political tool to push the church completely out. So public worship was banned. They never completely banned religion in a private household like some regimes did.
Mm-hmm.
I think Albania, they actually stopped people from owning Bibles and things, which is crazy. But I guess that's like communist states. They kind of do things like that. But
yeah, when you have all the power.
Yeah. So instead, they were just trying to prevent religious figures from having any real influence. Mm-hmm. And the problem is they realized there was a gap, spiritual gap, straight away, because they were one of the first places to really enact it in historical terms. They were one of the first places to do it, and they realized that it's a new idea, and there's a big cultural gap, and they actually started doing like this cult of reason thing to fill in like the public holidays and and it was really weird. People were supposed to go around dressed as like the goddess of reason, and
Joan of Arc and other figureheads in French history. They tried to replace God and morality with people who did moral things, but they tried to remove the God out of most of it. And the religion from it. Well, they went a completely different turn. Whereas you look at the American Revolution, and while they were secular in the sense that they wanted freedom for religion, for all religions, they were also predominantly Christian. And therefore, moving on from it, they didn't have that lack of a moral compass, as it were, or like a moral identity. And they formed their own one, which was based on a lot of Christian beliefs.
Yeah, so they'd escaped religious persecution in the old world. So when they came to creating the new, they were looking at people like John Locke, thinking, well, we want to protect our rights, but there's a lot of different denominations of religion here, or at least of Christianity. They weren't really thinking about other religions as such, especially not the non-religious. So it was really to protect their religious freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the interesting thing about secularism, and I think it's why it's an idea worth defending. Although it can be abused, as it has been abused in some way in France and America, in both places it's protecting religion and it's protecting people from it.
Yeah, one more than the other. Obviously, France more protecting its people from religion, whereas America was protecting its religion from others.
Yeah.
So it was enshrining that they had religious freedom. So secularism is far from being anti-religion, but in the American instance is there to protect their freedom to practice what religion they want to. And in France, obviously, is trying to take it away. But at the same time, they're not removing people who are religious, just their authority from obviously having any power, which is the whole point of secularism.
Do you know anything about India?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, though, in India. And I actually think, do you want to say what the India bit is, and I'll try and make the connection with America for you?
Okay. So, little bit of, I think we're going a bit too fast here. So,
you tell them that, and I'm going to pour a drink.
Well, India's always had lots of different religions. It's always been very culturally and religiously diverse. Generally, the people in India, they read the Vedas, and religion evolved from these collections of texts. And the main sort of philosophical principle is Dharma, which has no real translation into English. And it can mean a lot of different things anyway. And a lot of religions developed out of this. So I'm talking about Hinduism.
Yeah.
But
And their sects.
of course, Hinduism isn't really a single religion in and of itself. So even at the very beginning, and Hinduism being the oldest known religion, India has always had lots of different religions, in a sense, even if you just think of Hinduism itself. So you've obviously got the Jains, the Buddhists, and later the Muslims invaded. So
The Mughals.
you've got that empire, that caliphate going into India, and there's probably more friction than ever before, but I think in a lot of cases there was a lot of harmony, especially when you think of like Sufis and stuff. They sort of got along together. There was a lot of tolerance being preached. In some cases there really wasn't. There was a lot of violence.
You get the Indo-Greeks. That's a lot of
Yeah.
mashing together.
Yeah.
A lot of statues. I think I mentioned it the other day that the forgive me for my ignorance of not knowing things. What is that silver statue, Connor?
Oh, Ganesh.
Ganesh. You have ones of Ganesh, and on either side is Hercules.
Yeah, it's really weird mashup of culture.
Yeah.
And India's always had that. And then, of course, you got the Sikhs coming in later on.
Mm-hmm.
And their whole spiel is really like nobody can know the ultimate truth. So, again, a lot of room for religions to be more tolerant of one another and to have to exist together if in some capacity.
Yeah. Or, collide together.
Yeah, there's also, they do collide. There's also the Bhakti movement, which was a big sort of Hindu movement, which emphasized a more private kind of religion rather than public. So yeah, a lot of room for secularism, and it's obviously something that's needed, some kind of framework like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's always had some form of secularism. The whole region was never one particular religion.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense to have that as a secular society for purely administrative reasons.
Yeah, and this is one of
really
the big...
struggled to get that word out then.
Yeah, well done. This is one of the big pros of secularism itself, which is just the pragmatic argument. Even if you're a religious bigot, you can at least accept that secularism works in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And it allows for this big multiplicity of lots of different variants of religions to actually dialogue with one another and to harmonize.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not entirely unique to the modern world as well. Trying to think of examples in the past. Egypt was a big multicultural hub for a long time, allowing Jews to pray, which when other countries didn't.
Yeah, but then you go down a different path if you're trying to argue that, because they're not exactly secular.
No.
But they are
tolerant
because you get things like the Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire was incredibly tolerant towards Christians and Jews. Obviously being the Islamic Caliphate, but you still had tolerance within the empire. So I wouldn't exactly say they were secular.
I wouldn't. I think the Greeks had a kind of similar idea of secularism, but again, actual secularism doesn't really come about until the Enlightenment. But anyway, seeing this massive boiling pot of all these different religions, people like Gandhi and Nehru, probably just butchered his name. These people were really influenced by the Enlightenment and by a lot of those ideas, even if they were Hindu themselves. Some of the reformists and the anti-colonialists, and that's another religion that was there, Christianity. But again, they weren't there to turn everyone into Christians, although they certainly did try with missionaries, but they weren't exactly there to convert. They were there for lots of other reasons, but conversion wasn't the main one. So that's another religion added to the mix. So in order to deal with a lot of these religions, they adopted secularism, which came through in waves after the British left. The problem is, especially with the differences, the very stark differences between Muslim Sharia law and Hindu law, secularism doesn't really work in the context that you'd think it would here. So there was this case where this lass was getting a divorce from some Muslim man, and basically, because she was a Muslim, the Muslim community were like, well, she doesn't get anything because she's a Muslim, and she knows that because she's willingly a Muslim. Trying to apply like a civic law for everybody is the problem, because they were saying, that is the Muslim community, they were saying, well, you're applying Hindu laws to us as Muslims. So that's the opposite of secularism, because you're pushing your religion onto us. And so weirdly, secularism in India is like a third kind. So it's not protecting the individuals from the state, And it's not protecting the state from the religion. It's protecting people from each other, basically. All these different minority groups. India is a really interesting case. And Turkey just renounced their secularism, didn't they?
Yeah.
In the last few years.
Which I think is mad, because they did really well at the start. Turkey, 1923, proper independence, proper independent country, go secular, renames Constantinople Istanbul, tries to get away from that, heritage of the Ottoman Empire, tries to become secular, becomes a neutral power. They do so well, and then they go back to becoming a religious state. I don't know how you can go backwards.
Well, it's always been a problem in Turkey. The problem was this reformist revolutionary who was an army officer. He basically became a statesman, and I think it was a coup, but he basically took over. And I mean, this was a slow process anyway. There were things happening like slavery being abolished and democracy being installed and homosexuality being decriminalized, the decline of the Ottoman Empire. But basically you had a situation where there were schools alongside religious ones. There were secular schools not teaching religious curriculums.
They've gone backwards in recent years.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, secularism is often seen as a more progressive thing.
Yeah.
And I think there are very good reasons for that. I think it's rightly so. But it's just really interesting, as well as some of the Islamic countries, to see that process being reversed in some cases. Because a lot of people, when the Enlightenment came out, I just said came out like it was a toy or something. When the Enlightenment happened...
Rolled off production, yeah.
Yeah. Some people thought that it was just this natural evolution of progress, that this was going to be the modern world from now on. It's just really interesting to see some countries being like, no, back to it, like back to a few ideas that we kind of had in the Middle Ages with a lot more nuance and a lot more reverence. Because it's like, things like established churches and theocracies aren't really relics of the Middle Age. They do have some arguments. I mean, I wouldn't argue for them, but...
It depends where you are and what the community is, I guess.
Yeah.
Say in the Vatican City, that makes perfect sense to have a theology there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't make sense to have it in, Bristol.
Well, the thing is, saying a country is a theocracy is quite a strong charge, and there's only a couple of countries, I think the Maldives and Saudi Arabia, that can truly claim to be actual examples of theocracy in the modern world.
Yeah.
To actually believe that they
are run entirely by religious leaders.
Yeah, and that those religious leaders, the laws that they pass are directly from God, directly divine.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of countries have laws that are religiously based. So a lot of Muslim countries operate on a law which is like, it's based on the Sharia, but it's also kind of to elements of secularism. Yeah. And that was the case for a long time. And I mean, even like Martin Luther in 1520s, he was saying that there's God's law and then there's our law, and the two aren't comparable. So things in the real world, for lack of a better term, are...
This material world?
Yeah. They are the product of humans, and they're flawed compared to God's will. And no one can know God's will, so there's always going to be that gap. And that was actually one of the first examples, really, of a Christian... I mean, Aquinas said some things before in the 1200s.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously people in the ancient Greek world were saying that, but a lot of that was lost for a while. But generally, it was in the Middle Ages that thinkers started to be like, well, hang on, okay, I'm religious, but maybe there's a difference between actual laws and God's law.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should accommodate for other religions or ways of thinking, or maybe we shouldn't think that we're all it.
Yeah.
And that was the start of secularism, really.
They're just heretics then.
Yeah. But then, I think you mentioned actually Hollyoake.
Mm-hmm.
Not Hollyoaks, the show.
No.
Which I've never watched.
Never watched it either, no.
All right.
But yeah, he tried to, in like 1841, define secularism for himself, and then he kept having to argue that he was religious and that, well, he was an atheist, but he had to argue, agnostic, and he had to argue, no, I'm not saying that, religion's awful, but, this is the right way of doing it. Britain, the UK, is a Christian country in terms of, has the Church of England, the head of state is the Church of England as well.
Yeah, so this is slightly different to a theocracy, which again, they're very rare. There aren't that many around now, but there is a danger of more appearing, and they aren't particularly good because it's literally against the law to be anything other than that state's religion.
Yeah.
You can't leave that religion. Everything is there's no distinguished difference between the government and the church.
The church is
they are exactly the same thing, and that's problematic because it takes something that arguably, and I would argue, I think a lot of Muslims would argue this as well, because we're talking about Saudi Arabia in particular. But I think they would argue that it is something that's private and spiritual and experiential. It's something that somebody has to experience themselves.
Yeah.
And there's also there's loads of theological arguments like, well, why didn't God just make everyone a Muslim to begin with? Because free will is a large part of it.
It's a test. They get more points if they convert.
Yeah, but it's like, why would you come to God on anything other than your own steam? God surely doesn't want forced converts. Then there's no choice involved. What value does your faith have if it's just
forced upon someone?
Yeah, it's like that's not a real decision. You were just forced into it, and a lot of so Baptists would recognize that it's a very core part of what they believe. I'm pretty sure other denominations of Christianity have very similarly strong beliefs about free will in a political context mainly as well.
Yeah,
but yeah, so England's not like that.
No,
but it does have what's called an established church, and obviously that's because Henry VIII wanted his leg over.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, we say we have an established church in this country, and this country is not obviously secular.
Yeah, although it has a very strong secular ethic, and it has a very less than 2% of people go to regular worship. Mm-hmm. That's how mental weekly worship.
Yeah,
and also the most young
Christmases
people
and all that. Yeah,
most young people identify as atheist, and most people say they're Christian, but most people also say they're non-religious. Mm-hmm. So I think that's that weird thing where it's like, well, people think that Christian means good person, or that they live in a Christian country or something. It's like, you're not Christian. Not really. You might believe in God. That's not the same as being a Christian. And living as a Christian isn't really the same. If you're a Christian, I think you take it much more seriously. So we're a Christian country in the sense that we have some archaic laws left over from...
Archaic law, and the hierarchy is set up to be religious. The lords...
House of Lords. You get bishops.
Bishops, sorry, not priests.
Yeah,
bishops. But you also then have the other religions are actually there as well.
Not by mandate. They don't have to be, whilst bishops do, and that's the problem. Mm-hmm. And I see the Queen actually defended this, and she said, "Well, I think it's misunderstood. It's not like we're not forcing religion on everyone. What we're doing is it's a better alternative than a secular state because the Church of England is so lovely. And basically, what we do is we welcome everybody. And part of us being a Christian nation is being really, really fair and tolerant." And so it's actually the best platform for other religions to be in this country. And I don't necessarily...
You can't argue against that, really.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. What I do disagree with is well, then you're a very kind host, but as an atheist, I can never feel like this is my country. I'm a guest in someone else's home. Mm-hmm. And that's my problem with it. And also it's just well, why not? If you're calling something something it is, why not just adopt secularism and just say we have a very proud heritage, Christianity, but it's not going to be reflected in law.
Yeah, but then you got to go to America, where they are secular, where they are predominantly Christian, a lot more ultra Christian than we are here, a lot more militant as well. And you think to yourself, well, if you're in a community surrounded by nothing but Bible bashers and you're an atheist, you're going to feel more out of place there in America than you are here, where you're not even, where it's not even a secular country. They are secular in belief, in constitution, in Bill of Rights, and yet at the same time they're literally bashing you with a Bible, going, "No, in God we trust."
Yeah, well, I think in God we trust. Did you hear about the recent flag in Mississippi?
No, Missouri, or Mississippi, one of the two, where they finally got rid of the Confederate flag off their actual state flag, and then replaced it with "In God we trust." No. You can't do that because it insinuates that everybody there believes in God. And it's just you have to leave those two things. Yeah. Well, it's on the dollar bill, isn't it? "In God we trust" as well.
Yeah.
But that was added later on in the 1940s, I think it was.
Well, you can believe in God and be an atheist in some weird way.
I was about to say, what a great way is that? Can I do that?
You can have a metaphorical God. Einstein did. Just pretend it's that, and just pretend it isn't exceptionalism.
Yeah. But no, America is a good example of a weird secular country. I think France is probably the best example of a secular country that works.
Yeah, the problem is France are very overzealous, and they've run into a lot of problems with how they're treating certain cases, which probably gives some examples of what secularism is in practice. as opposed to just talking about how certain countries have and their attitudes to religion. So wearing a religious cross when you're an NHS worker and then saying things like, I'm going to pray for your health, and then sitting there and praying.
Okay. I would say wear the cross, do not pray.
Yeah, the praying is, I agree with you that the praying is 100% over the line. Unless they're like friends with that person, well, they probably shouldn't be treating them.
Even that I wouldn't want that happening. I want, them to do their own thing. You want professionalism. I don't mind them wearing a cross. I put down wearing a cross the same as having a tattoo.
Here's the thing. Religion is a lot more meaningful and a lot bigger than politics. But I would be really weirded out if a doctor came in wearing like one of those little bands that seem to have gone out of fashion. Those like rubber bands you go around your wrist, support a certain charity. If you had one of those that said like vote Conservative, I'd be like, sorry, is that a uniform? Like, I don't really. It's not really the place for that. And I feel like if somebody wears a cross or a fucking tattoo saying like "Hail Satan,"
I find that hilarious.
It is kind of the same thing, and it's like, well, I don't really want the NHS to be thought of as a religious organisation or to favour one religion over another. And if it gets to a point where everyone's suddenly wearing crosses, I don't know. You have to make exceptions for certain people because I obviously there are
or just have it covered up.
Yeah,
that's a thing.
Of course.
Just do it like they would normally. Tattoos can't be on the arms and stuff, and can't be on the face or hands.
I don't mind it. The only problem, I think, one of the more recent cases was that it was a health and safety thing, that it was like a bracelet and they were wearing it during.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah, exactly. Or like it was a certain material. It's like, there's a code for a reason. It's like you can believe what you want.
Take off rings.
You have a uniform. Exactly. You can't like wear jewelry and stuff. It's saying that it's really meaningful to you. It's like, well, a ring could be really meaningful to you, but you still have to take it off. It's a uniform. It's like you're there to be a professional and do a job. Also, this nurse recently was like praying for one of her patients and spending like lots of time. And I think, well, that's not quite your job. That's a job for a chaplain to come in and pray for you.
Which they have.
They have chaplains. They also have atheist chaplains, which is great.
What do they do?
They talk about the meaning of life with you, and you get really depressed.
I thought they were looking over the body going, I hope you get better.
Yeah.
Thumbs up to them.
Yeah. No, they do podcasts, and it's really depressing.
Yeah.
There's other examples. People refusing to work on a day of rest for their religion.
I find that very problematic.
Yeah.
Because one, fair enough. You might literally not want to work the Sunday or a Saturday, depending on who you are.
Or Seventh-day Adventists as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a Christian too. All that happened, except it was Saturday instead. It's like, right, great, okay.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that input.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that, I think if I owned a company and I worked, my company was open on weekends, and one of my staff came up to me and said, "Hi there, by the way, I can never work Saturdays or Sundays because of my religion. Another employee of mine will want to do this," and they come to me and go, "Oh, I can't work Saturday because I'm going drinking. I can't. Unfortunately, need to work because she can't work or he can't work because it's their day of rest. So I need you to cover." It's like you're then prioritizing their religion over someone else.
Yeah, I get that. See, and I also think that religion, it isn't necessarily a choice. And this is something I've been coming to the realization of. I don't think religion is a choice, but I do think you have to be accountable in some sense for the religion you have. It's like faith,
I like that.
Experiences of faith do happen to you, as opposed to you just going, okay, I'm going to be a Sikh today. Oh, by the way, I can't do this or that and that. I can't eat pork or whatever. It's like, I do think it happens to you, but I also think that when you're coming down to specific theology and choices, I do think it is then you saying that. So if you say I can't work Saturday, and I do think it's pretty much the same as somebody saying I have to visit my aunt on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is still a choice, but I would say it's an incredibly meaningful choice, and as an employer, I would take that very seriously. It's just, in terms of law, do you then?
Well, that's the thing. You can't discriminate on religion now.
No,
since you couldn't before, but since 2010, obviously you couldn't do that. So if you're through the interview, and you're hiring for like a Sunday job,
Yeah.
And you interview and they say, oh, they got perfect qualifications, they're perfect for the job, and they go, I can't work Sundays actually because of this. You could say no to them, obviously, because they can't work Sundays, but then they could probably go to a tribunal.
Well, I know. I
Their
think that's to do with the job description. The job is working on a Sunday because it's like, okay, we're hiring a female stripper, and
I'm just giving you
a male turns up.
I'm just giving you an example of like how
I know
how crazy something like the situation could get.
But it's like, yeah, but I don't think that would be a problem because like if you were hiring for a female stripper, and then a man turns up, you're like, well, we didn't say a man. It's like, oh, you're discriminating against me, my gender. It's like, well, no, because you say you're a man, and we were asking for a female. So this is like totally the different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or being like, we need English speaking people to do this job, or we're asking for Black or Asian people to counsel immigrants that have had traumatic experiences who might not want to see a white person. They want to see somebody of their ethnic background.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, it's in the job description in those particular instances. And I think like a Sunday is exactly the same thing. It's like, well, we were asking you if you can work Sunday and you can't work Sunday. So
no,
like,
thank you.
We can't really accept your application based on that. And I do think religion is more of a choice than other protected characteristics like age and gender. You can't choose those things. They happen to you.
Wow. You can choose your gender. That's a whole thing.
No, I don't think it's a choice. I think you feel that way.
You feel it and then you choose to identify.
Yes. Now, yeah, but it's the thing. Is religion a choice or is it not? And it's like, yeah, I'm coming around to the idea that it isn't a choice. Exactly. Because it does happen to you. It is something you experience, but it is still more chosen than
others.
Ethnicity.
Yeah, of course.
So I think there should be a little bit of leeway in that regard. But yeah, there's some really interesting cases and it's really difficult to decide what to do. It's like, so Native Americans, as part of their religion, were like fucking like bonging up on the job, like just fucking going crazy on like loads of like hallucinogenic drugs. And it's just like, okay, well, it's part of your culture and your religion.
Yeah.
This is an American court, obviously, and they were like, well, we kind of took all that away from you and kind of made you work in supermarkets and things rather than on reservations.
Yeah.
I think they ruled against them in the end. It's just like,
shocker.
It's just like,
what a shocker.
Yeah,
it was against the Native Americans.
Yeah, it's just like, well, you can't really do that. Yeah. It's just like, well, okay.
Well, that's what I mean. How far does secularism go?
Yeah, it's always breathing room.
Okay, Aztecs.
Yeah,
used to do human sacrifice.
This is another idea that came from the Enlightenment. It's called the harm principle, and you probably come across it studying history. It's this idea that I think it's kind of been taken in the modern day as like, well, you can do anything you like so long as you're not harming anyone. And I think this is sort of where it comes from, and it's Mill's harm principle, John Stuart Mill, and he's basically saying you can do anything so long as it doesn't infringe on
someone else,
everyone else doing what they want to do.
Yeah. And
of course, there are lots of revisions and nuances to that idea, and that idea is really part and parcel of what secularism is as well, because it's again enforcing people's individual liberty as well as providing like a practical framework for things to work.
Yeah, provides a practical universal law that everyone can build upon, and as long as you keep within those boundaries, you can practice whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It makes it fairer for everyone,
and keeping people's freedom as well and their dignity to do what they want as well in principle and practice. So yeah, it's just a shame that not everybody kind of has this understanding. So I said a Christian
in a pub
a while back.
Standard.
Yeah. And they were actually there to like proselytize, and they were like handing out leaflets and shit.
Oh God.
And
that sounds... Was I there?
No. No, you weren't. He still owes me £2 actually.
Take it from the communion next time.
Yeah.
Find a church.
Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so we were talking and I explained what secularism was, that it was actually started as a religious principle almost with the reformists and things in the 15th century. And I was saying like, it's there to protect religious rights.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that the government doesn't have a particular sway in a certain religion, that it can't prioritize a certain denomination. It's like your Church of England, it's like you wouldn't want Methodists or Seventh-day Adventists, having their privileges in law. They're getting their taxes exempt. That being taught in schools as like the truth, and then your religion not, the only way you can guarantee that protection of minorities and the majority is
no religion.
Is to have no religion. That's not atheism as well, because atheism gets the same treatment. So why would you not want that? And he's like, well, I just, I think God's word is the law and we should all follow it. It's just like, yeah, you think that. Other people think other things. So this is another idea, the veil of ignorance. Imagine that you couldn't guarantee what color you were, what sexuality you were. You were going to be born any second, and you were like, oh God, I'm going to be like reincarnated any minute now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the lottery of life. I don't know what kind of person I am. Tall, short, whether I got a beard or...
We fucked up the lottery, didn't we?
Small cock. Yeah, we did.
Try again.
Yeah. So any of these things, under those conditions... Sorry, I just laughed. Yeah, under those conditions...
Would you want equality?
Yeah, surely you would want secularism. If you couldn't guarantee your religion in the next life, you would say secularism. So you're a fucking hypocrite if you say you don't want secularism, because that's just you banking on privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying, oh no, slavery is a good thing. It's like, okay, well...
what if you were born a slave?
Yeah, reincarnation's coming around. You might be born black. Oh no, slavery's bad now, is it? Ah, yeah. Thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, the veil of ignorance is a very useful sort of... tool of liberalism. Yeah, it's a really good thing to think about, whether you want to decide whether something's a good idea or not. Blank slate,
I quite like the idea if we became a secular country.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to forget our Christian roots. I do think it's a little bit annoying when people say we're a Christian country. It's like, well, yeah, we're also a lot of other things.
In this instance, obviously, I did describe us as a Christian country, but only because, for the sake of this argument, and because we actually are. But I'd never go around going, oh yeah, you know what? We're a Christian country. I'd say we're a liberal democracy.
Yeah.
And then that's about as far as I go. Secularism helps. I think all it does is just protect people. It tries to help them as best as it can, using tools that it has at its disposal.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't want to be secular and you want to prioritize one religion over another, you've really got to ask yourself, why? And a lot of people do it because it keeps them in power.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do it because it is easily to corrupt the masses using a religion. Because, religion is the opium of the masses.
Here's the thing, right? Opium of the masses quote is often misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. Did I misquote it?
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah.
Damn.
Because
opium's good for you.
Yeah. No, well, Marx didn't actually mean that religion was bad. He thought that people love religion because they're oppressed and it's like a escapist thing.
Yeah.
So it's opium in that sense. Not that the ruling class use religion, but
they do though.
Specifically what he meant was like people are oppressed, therefore they turn to religion. Marx saw it as like the expression of human suffering. He saw it as like a thing that people do when they're alienated by the means of production. Not that it was a tool for oppressing people itself, even though obviously it is.
It was a collective.
And that's the weird thing about communism. It's like, but what's weird is communism then just started like trying to destroy churches. It's just like, no, because Marx said when communism happens, there won't be a need for churches, that people will abandon religion off their own steam.
Yeah.
But you seem to be sort of worried that it's going to stay, and it's
it was a whole jump, it was a...
Yeah, so you clearly haven't read Marx.
No. Well, Russia, I think, was probably probably the worst country to actually adopt bloody communism, because it wasn't industrialized enough. So there wasn't that proletariat there ready. There was a lot, because obviously Russia's got a large population, but there wasn't enough as what you'd think. Germany would have been a much better country to do it, because they had a lot more proletariat and it could easily create that perfect utopia. Whereas Russia had too many. It tried too hard to advance itself once it became bourgeois.
I think it's a big misreading of Marx as well.
I said bourgeois. I meant Bolshevik. Fuck.
Yeah. I was going to say. Yeah. No. I think secularism can actually be enforced quite harshly, and I think although a lot of communist countries became effectively an atheist religion,
yeah,
I think that it's also possible for them to just have been a bit harsh as well, even if they didn't go full whack with the whole communism is a religion thing. And I think that also puts a lot of people off, that secularism isn't always practical, and it can sometimes lead to whatever. But it's the exact same with democracy. It doesn't mean you abandon democracy just because something has some flaws, or maybe certain contexts don't quite make it easy. It's the best situation. It's not about being perfect. Secularism is far from perfect. In fact, by its nature, it's a compromise. But the alternatives are far worse. You just end up oppressing people. Either
way you go.
Yeah, there's no way around it. It's like, do you want oppression? No. Well, it's like a flowchart. Well, secularism.
Go around in a circle.
Try again. Do you want secularism? Yes.
Well done.
Yeah, well done. Do you want secularism? No. Do you want women to drive? No. You are Saudi Arabia. In one of those women's magazines.
Help magazine. Literally.
Yeah. Do you want secularism? Yes. Do you want secularism? No. You want Turkey?
You want Turkey, yeah.
Should we leave it there, or have you got anything else?
No, not really. Finish on a high.
Fucking hell, look at that. I fucking love testing audio,